Hey YouTube, this is The Art of Prepping. I wanted to do a video inside about the factors contributing to the decline of America. It's raining outside. I would rather be in the woods, but it's cold, rainy, and a lot of wind, and I don't want to get sick. I've been dealing with a little bit of sinus issues off and on, especially drainage in my ears. And so that's why my voice has been a little off. And I know a lot of people are dealing with this, though the weather's been very off and on. It'd be sunny and bright and almost warm one day, and then it's very cold. And then we have had like hailstorms and snow, and it's just really crazy. So I just wanted to talk about these contributing factors of why America is unfortunately in the decline. And it really is. It's not my opinion. You can look around, just compare 5 and 10 years ago to today, and you'll see that there's a wide girth of difference in how we as people are living and how we are actually interacting with each other. And there's so many facets to this. And so what I'm about to speak of is just the tip of the iceberg. There's probably a lot more. And I also want to preference, though, that if you get offended easily, and you're not really adaptable to other people's opinions, or you're not really able to listen to another person speak their mind, then go ahead and close out of this video, because there's going to be things that are controversial, that are of my opinion and of my viewpoint of that they are a problem. And so you don't have to agree with much, if any, of this video, but these are just my opinions, and I'm sure there's things that I would disagree with you, that if you were to do this same type of video, that you would get a lot of conflict with others. I've noticed doing videos, I've done a lot of videos on YouTube, and I can tell you that you can never please everyone. There's always going to be 2 to 5% of your viewing audience that pretty much hates what you have to say. And you could be speaking the absolute truth, and you could be giving the best advice possible on that subject, but you will always get haters. And you always get trolls, and you always get people who want to tear you down because they don't understand how to build themselves up. And so I am at the point now that I don't really care what people have to say. I appreciate my subscribers to voice their opinion, but I'm not taking it personal. I don't really care which way you go on this. I'm just speaking it how I feel and see it. And I think that you will see that I am correct. And this is not even really an opinion. It's really just factual. I'm just basically just telling you facts. So this is how it goes. And so I'm having to have a little bit thicker skin over the time that I've been on YouTube, just because there's a lot of very vicious people. And for me to survive on YouTube, there's no other way to go about it than to get a little bit more thicker skin. I guess that's just the best way you could say it. So anyways, without further ado, let's talk about the factors contributing to the decline of America. I like to first point out the mentality of Americans and how they've changed over time. It used to be that you wanted something, or if you wanted to live a certain lifestyle, you would find ways to actually, provide that, to make it happen. You would go and you would work. You would go and get education. And while some people still do this, and that's another thing I want to preface, not everyone falls in this gap or all these points, but I'm just saying in as a whole, in general, the country has a lot of these problems. So it's the mentality of entitlement that we see now substituting or replacing the work ethics of earning your keep. And there's a lot of blame games going on. A lot of people pointing fingers that they're owed something, or they have a right to certain things, and at the expense of other people who've actually worked, and even other previous generations that have worked to provide certain assets and capabilities for society. And so we also have work ethic that goes hand in hand with mentality, of this type of mentality in particular. That we also have not so much just the less of doing something like working, that's becoming more prevalent because of the welfare system and all kinds of different systems set up to basically keep people from wanting to be productive. But we actually have a lack of doing meaningful things, having meaning in our life, and doing meaningful things and actions, which result, if you did do meaningful things into fruitful things that you could be proud of. That's not there anymore for in a large degree. There's definitely people who have found their niche in life and have found a type of purpose. Some people it's through their job, some people it's through their family, some people it's through their own personal journey in life that they have connected with what they need. And so they're pretty much fulfilled. And that is awesome, but it's actually quite a small minority from what I've seen in my life. And while I'm not very old and I'm not very young either, I'm in the middle there that says, hey, in my lifetime, I've seen a lot of despair. And it's mainly because people have no direction. And they don't even want to even look at creating their own direction. They think it should be handed to them, or someone needs to tell them what they need to do. And that's the biggest problem, that there really isn't like concrete objective answers in life. And so this is a big problem with people who are raised in wishy-washy families. That you just do whatever you want, honey. Well, that is true. You can do whatever you want, but there is no guidance in the sense of building that person up so they can make those decisions. So there's a lot of self-esteem issues, is what I'm saying, in America. A lot of people have very low self-esteem. And so that obviously has something to do with the culture and media, but it's also parenting. That you have to build a sense of esteem in your children so they can actually, grow and build from that. So we have work ethic. And now let's go to the parenting real quick. Especially single parents are becoming extremely prevalent. Both mothers and fathers are being single parents. There is a breakdown not only in communities, but obviously in the family. And I'm not saying that, marriage is going to solve it all. No, I don't think it is. That's just another legal institute. Now, some people go into marriage also as a religious institute, and that's up to you. That's something that, you have to decide. But there is no statistical data at all. In fact, there's constant levels of proof that shows that it's the same level of basically endurance in a relationship in terms of a marriage, that people who are married religiously or non-religiously are actually at the same divorce rate. So it doesn't matter just because you have this consecrated, supposedly relationship to church, or you've pronounced vows in front of God or something like that. It's the same occurrence rate of divorce between people who get married just purely in a legal fashion, and also those who do it in a church. So we have problems, though, because it's not so much that we need more legal means. We need more family interaction. And so when a child doesn't have a parent, especially if they're totally absent, not just these families that throw their kid one weekend at one house and a weekend at another house, there's a lot of instability there as well. But I'm talking about families that actually just have one parent and the other one is completely not there. That's actually becoming quite common. Unfortunately, a lot of males are actually the ones not around, and there's a lot of reasons to some degree. Some not so valid, some more valid. But what I'm here to say is that there's two sides to this, and there's a lot of problems with the actual relationship itself, and the child is actually the victim of all this. Now, what breaks down families? Well, there's a communication issues all over the place. People don't know how to communicate with each other. But the other part is that people don't have the longevity of vision with each other. They don't have a plan. When they get together, they don't say, hey, just like prepping, you have to have a plan. This is what my goals are in life. What are your goals in life? What do you want to do in the next year, 2 years, 5 years, 10 years? And while that may seem so rigid, it's not when you're actually trying to, in a way, create a contract and a relationship that's a give and take to some degree with another person. You have expectations. You may not say it out loud that you expect certain things from your partner or your husband or your spouse, whatever you want to call it. But there are expectations. And after so many disappointments, and so much stress, you will eventually leave that relationship or that contract. And this is what we see in business and in relationships across America. There's a breakdown in communication, and people have lost that particular skill to some degree, at least a large amount, of how to come together and be on the same page with stuff, um, how to actually build relationships so that each party gets their needs and even most of their wants met. And so that is lacking in this culture these days. The next is relationships. The degradation of relationships is really coming across pretty fast in terms of how disposable people think they are to each other. I see this in social media constantly, but that's a lot easier because it's not in person. But I can see that even when I go in town to larger cities, people typically, are pretty impersonal, a lot more so than maybe a small town. But I see across the board that people don't write letters to their loved ones. They don't even want to have a phone call, conversation, actually like a verbal conversation anymore, in person or on the phone. They'll maybe do a text message or maybe an email, but everything has got very impersonal. And even to the point that we shop a lot online. You may say, well, that actually saves us time and we can get a better deal. And while those are some valid reasons, there are some people who just don't want to interact with society. And that is not always a bad thing because society may not be always the best thing, especially in the current world we live in. But there's also this part that we're isolating each other. So isolation is becoming a bigger and bigger problem with the modern world. Even though we have more and more technology to connect ourselves, we feel more isolated and there's more despair because of it. Loss of skills. Now, I mean, just look around at some of the generations that are the youngest right now, and you'll see that their knowledge and their skill levels are really based in a lot of computers and social media, popular types of how would you say that? Trivial knowledge of popular media or just things that really don't matter. Like, what did so and so do last week? This particular famous person did, or did you know all these little trivial facts about this movie? Those kind of crap things are taking over society. A lot of very crappy types of use of your time. And the real knowledge, especially about how to better yourself, how to be more prepared, how to communicate, how to be more successful in your life, just to know general things of cooking, growing gardens, being able to educate yourself, basically even like raise kids. These skills are like becoming very rare, and you have to actually go to specialists these days, special people that can tell you how to raise your kids. Because sometimes your own family just says, well, I don't really know how to do it per se because I was never taught. And that's why we had so many problems. And so there's a lot of these kind of problems that I see, that the information from one generation is not being passed down to another, either because they don't have the information or they're not confident in it, or there's not enough good communication. And you'll hear this throughout my little rant here today, that communication skills are just completely been reduced. And in my opinion, they're in a regressive state. The next thing is mutual respect. Man, I tell you what, especially on the internet or on the comment section on YouTube, you get some very nasty people because they can hide behind their channel. And so that you never really know who they are. And so there's very disrespectful people, not just on the internet, but even in real life. Now, once again, I live in a more rural area and people are pretty nice. But the more populated that I've ever lived, or at least the places that I live that have more population, I should say, how actually have higher densities of actually nasty people. And this is kind of common sense. There's also a lot more crime in larger cities typically. And so what do we have here? That basically we have mutual respect is a decision that people are deciding not to make, because it is a choice to respect yourself and your neighbors or your maybe family and friends or even strangers. You have to make that choice of how far do you want to take, your wants and your ideology, and how far do you push it on other people, and how flexible are you going to be when those don't fit that parameter that you set? Because there's going to be a lot of people, even like, you guys probably are saying to yourself, well, already I don't agree with a few things you said. And that's fine. There's so many things that make us unique and different. And if we don't start to get to that point that we recognize that all these differences actually are really not that bad, that the differences should be celebrated, and that makes our nation so cool. And I'm not talking about the differences like we need to have all these foreign languages come in and replace English. I'm not for that at all. We need to have our language, and we need to have our culture and our identity, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I'm talking about having mutual respect, and which starts with our self-esteem and respecting ourselves. So the next thing would be our educational system. Now, this is a whole nother video, really. But the educational system is completely just, especially in a public educational system, in most locations around the United States, is in complete disrepair. It is just unbelievable, the level of competency. It's almost like they preach things or they teach things. And I use the word preach because a lot of this is really not even that, it should not even be taught in a school system. It should be at home. But there's a lot of stuff in the school system that is really around or evolves around regurgitating information and not really actually learning it. So you're not really coming away with real knowledge. And the educational system really isn't connected symbiotically, like with the home. The parents are not always that interactive. And I can tell you about this firsthand because I used to work in the school system. And I can tell you that it's pretty jacked up. The very limited amount of interaction with teachers and parents. And I get to a point that I left that particular industry because of the stress level, and because the kids are just, and I go so far to say it was an abusive environment to see in public schools how kids are actually treated and how little respect is given to them. And we wonder why they don't respect other people. So these are big problems here. The home life doesn't reinforce school, and the school doesn't reinforce or even respect home life anymore. And so what you're seeing, though, more so than not, especially in inner cities and some rural areas, but less in my opinion, that school systems are actually raising the kids. And this is a massive problem on so many levels, because what we have is whoever the teacher and whoever their ideology is, and they typically, unfortunately, in public schools, lean a lot more to the left. And so you have this progressive liberal mentality. Basically, their propaganda is starting to really manipulate and influence the next generation more so than it ever really should, because the parents should be there as a stopgap to say, hey, that is what you were taught was bullcrap. We don't believe in socialism. We don't believe in bigger government. We believe in this and that. And so that isn't happening, though. Now, the next thing is going to be the lack of focus and goals on a personal level, because I'm going to talk about, personal things and then things like with the government too in this little video. Lack of focus and goals. So what do I really mean by that? What I mean by that is that on an individual level, we as people in general, from what I've seen in my life, don't know what we're doing or where we're going with anything. We're just typically going through the motion. We're just typically trying to make a few dollars, trying to pay a bill, have a status in society, try to earn respect from people. Typically, we don't even know. And then we're surprised. We're surprised when we don't find that we're not really happy, because we're not doing things to be happy. We're just doing things to get on with life. And sometimes it's not enough just to kind of go through the motion. Sometimes you actually want real substance in your life. And this is where we fail in America, because there's too much fake facade everywhere. That's why I had to leave the big city years ago, because most of the things are very fake, and people are fake because of it. And there's really no real objective in their lives. They just literally are just getting through the day. And I couldn't deal with that anymore. I'm like, hey, if you want to just drudge like that through the rest of your life, hey, do it without me. So I'm going to stop here and pick up on part 2. So check that out here when it comes out. Thanks for your support. Thanks for watching. Catch you soon.